right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes as we open up this AY session. Heavenly Father, thank you for another Sabbath day. We thank you for continuing to bless us and guys protect us throughout this week. I pray that you would be with the speaker at this time, be with the panelists. I pray that that you continue to guide them in their answers that they give, in the presentation itself. I pray that you would allow us to get this message that you want us to get. Pray that we would learn something new, something that we can apply to our own lives, something that we can share with others. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. The Adventist aim, the Adventist message to all the world in my generation. The motto, the love of Christ compels me, and the AY pledge, loving the Lord Jesus, I promise to take an active part in the youth ministry in the church, doing what I can to help others and to finish the work of the gospel in all the world.
Thank you, Linissa. Now we're going to sing our song. You can sing with me or sing with us. Adventist youth are we, from every land and sea. Together we play and work and pray in happy harmony. We have a faith to share with others everywhere. A message of love from God above to show the world we care. Adventist youth, Adventist youth, Adventist youth. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Adventist youth are we. Land and sea. Together we play and work and pray in happy harmony. We have a faith to share with others everywhere. A message of love from God above to show the world we care. Adventist youth, Adventist youth, Adventist youth. Okay, everybody, I'd like to welcome everyone to another AY program. Thanks for those that's been very supportive, that's been coming on every week to support our evening services. Like I said in times past, we love our youth, we love our young adults, and during this time of quarantine, we want to have services for them. All right, so that's our motive for why we do what we do. So tonight, this evening program is going to be a very good program. All right, the topic is the anatomy of addiction. So we're going to hear a lot about it from our guest speaker, Gary Graham, and you'll hear more about him later on. So it's going to be a very good program this evening. Just want to let you know of the next 2 Sabbaths. We'll be having services, our final 2 Sabbaths. Next Sabbath will be our rally day. All right, Pastor Corey Marshall, he's a youth pastor from the Ephesus SDA Church. He will be our speaker. And even time, same time, this time next week, we're planning on having a concert. And we want to have a concert giving God praise and showing gratitude to those that have been working tirelessly in fighting this virus and helping those that are sick, like those on the front line, like our nurses and our doctors and the EMT workers. So, we want to give God praise for that through our concert next week. The Sabbath after that, we have our Sabbaths that will be focusing on a Mary Hart, and our speaker for that Sabbath is Gary's brother, Pastor Paul Graham. In the evening time, we will actually be doing an interview with him, and also Anthony Hatchett. Anthony Hatchett is the creator of the funny videos that we usually show for AY. So he'll be on Sabbath, June 6th, where we'll interview him and learn more about these 2 individuals. Also, every Thursday from 7 to 8:30, we have Exhale. If you haven't been on it, you're really missing out. So we would encourage you to come on for Exhale. One of our panelists, 2 of our panelists that'll be on this evening for this evening programs, they're actually co-hosts and hosts for Exhale. So, so I want you to try to tune in every Thursday for Exhale. So sit back once again, relax, and let us worship the Lord in beautiful holiness through our AY program.
Good evening and happy Sabbath, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing the Gary Graham. Gary Graham is a native of Brooklyn, New York. He loves his church family, friends, and community. Gary presently owns a private counseling practice. His extensive education, coupled with his experience as an executive in the healthcare industry and within faith-based organizations, supports his expertise in his extensive consulting work as he educates about public health. Currently, Gary is pursuing his doctorate at the SUNY Downstate School of Public Health. His 2 master's degree in rehabilitation counseling from New York University and public health from a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling from the New York University and a master's degree in public health with SUNY Downstate School support his doctoral emphasis on his community and immigrant health as he continues to impact the healthcare and mental health industries. Gary is married to Nilsa, and they have 1 son. After our special music by Lachelle, the next person you'll hear is our presenter, Gary Graham.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lachelle. I hope that, when I hear that, I think of American Idol. My wife and I are big American Idol fans, and now they do it over across the video. So I wanted to thank you for that. And it was a blessing and very professional. I just wanted to thank everybody for giving me the opportunity to work with you. I was supposed to work with everybody a couple of months ago. Nisa invited me, and we finally got everything together. I know Cecil, his sister, goes to church with me at Ephesus, but I claim Brooklyn first. And so Brooklyn is my home. A little bit about me. Lately, we've been going around doing a lot of broadcasts, and I have to admit, I am blessed to work with Federation. My brother has nothing but great things to say about the Federation. I see how great you guys work together. So if people see the name Graham and it looks familiar, I am the older brother of Pastor Paul and Patrick Graham. They're the twins, and they turned 50 this year. So God bless them. I'm a little older than them, but I like to be known as the original Graham. So I do have my own platform, Boss Move Soft Move. You'll see me on Facebook, IG, LinkedIn, and of course YouTube. Just like I subscribe to your federation, I hope everybody gets an opportunity to get a chance to subscribe to Boss Move Soft Move. I went to Oakwood University. I got my bachelor's in history. Then I went to New York University, rehab counseling there, got my master's there. And then I started working at SUNY Downstate. And then I fell in love with public health. So what's going on with COVID today, public health and mental health has kind of melded itself together. I'm also a certified alcohol and substance abuse counselor. I'm a master counselor where that is concerned. And those are the stuff we're going to talk about today. Usually people ask me to talk about COVID and mental health, but you guys wanted to go a little different, which is very happy because there are some addiction information I want to give to you on a broad level. And I'm also a licensed mental health counselor, have a private practice. I'm a consultant. I'll just stop there. So like, for instance, with public health, I was able to speak to some churches to close a little bit earlier than other churches and convince them when COVID came down. And when now that the data has come back, we were able to save people. And what I'm doing today is speaker and presenter. So I know you guys have a wide audience and you could have picked anybody. And I see what you guys have on tap coming down the road, and you guys are working hard. So I did tell you, thank you for everybody. Let me just give shout out to Breath of Life, Norwalk, Mount of Olives, Faith, Joy, Shiloh, Bridgeport Tabernacle, Oasis Hill, Omega, Hope, and Charity. The moderators, the panelists, and like I said from last night, the structure, and for you guys to find a place in this broadcast Zoom boom, you have my utmost faith to keep the young people moving forward. And there will be a day, that I will probably see you face to face. And most of all, the CEO's church, Nisa, I would not forget Mount Zion. I would not be here. That was not done on purpose. Big shout out to Mount Zion. Okay. The references and some of the cited work we're going to be talking about today is New York State of Alcohol and Substance Abuse. New York State City Department of Health, the Center of Disease Control. No matter what you think about the Center of Disease Control, it's they're very worthy of the data that comes out. The National Institute of Health, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and of course SAMHSA. Even though it's SAMSAA, people in the industry call it SAMHSA, and they have a lot of data there. After this is done, if you want to, as the young people say, hit me up and you need more data, I know we got some social workers and doctors here. I'll be more than happy to cite you and send you some information where that is concerned. I want to start off with a couple of verses that has been in my heart for the last 3 weeks. I've gone through my trials and tribulations this week. Even though it has hit home, these 3 verses has been close to my heart. Exodus 15, verse 26. If you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commandments and keep all his decrees, I will not bring any diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I, the Lord, who heals you. The second verse is Exodus 23, verse 25. So you shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of you. I guess I don't have to say any more than that. By serving God, he would take us out and he will bless us, try to keep the sickness away from us. And my favorite, you shall come to the grave at a full age, as a sheaf of the grain ripens in its season. Simply in public health, what we do in public health, we try to stop people from expiring prematurely. And if you remain faithful like in Job, you shall come to a full age. Just like my comedian Jerry Stiller from Kings of Queens, went to 90 years old. He lived a full life, and we want to live a full life. And COVID has been taking people away prematurely. So I wanted to leave that with you guys. So the anatomy of addiction. So when we think of anatomy, we basically think about that slab of a person on the table, and you dissect their parts and what have you. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the anatomy of a human being, but basically the second definition for anatomy is the study of the structure of the internal workings of something. The anatomy of addiction, it has its own path. So I'm going to go through about 10 different addictions. And when you think of analysis, you think of probing, we're going to review, evaluate, but there's so many different addictions. And sometimes when people think of addiction, they think of cocaine, marijuana, but there's more than that. So what I'm going to present to you guys and all the leaders is that there are different addictions that we see in this country and that you should pay attention to. And furthermore, because I know you're going to invite me back or you want to consult with me or what have you, I will be more than happy to talk about some of the separate addictions. And I will take questions on those 10 addictions. I am an expert in most of them. And some of them I still am working on some certifications. But nevertheless, I'm here to present those addictions. So the word addiction basically is the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. So when we think of substance, we think of drinking and we think of cocaine. Thing, it could be an innate object that we still keep to, and an activity, whether it's gambling or doing something that you shouldn't do, or sexual activities. But addiction is things I'm addicted to working out or what have you. But what I want you to know is when you think about addiction, what I want you to think about is that the disruption of your life. So on February 26th of this year, Dr. Messimer of the CDC jumped out of place and made a press release, because every week the CDC comes up with a press conference or a roundtable that they have. And I can shoot that to you if you need to. And what she said caught my eye. And she said, she sat down with her family at her table and she wrote it and she let everybody know. She says, the way COVID is coming into this world, our lives will change and it will be the disruption of our lives. As a public health person, I knew that was coming. Addiction is the same thing. So, over the last 10 weeks, all of our lives has been disruptive. Addiction is different than somebody who dabbles in something. Addiction disrupts your life. So, for instance, if I was addicted to something, or there's somebody that was supposed to be here today, they are behaving in their addiction, whether it's pornography, whether it's drinking, whether it's smoking weed, or whether it's cocaine, that at 4:30 today, Cecil called in all of us to review what we're supposed to do. Last night, we reviewed our mic checks and what have you. Somebody who's addicted to something probably we wouldn't have made those back to back, or probably is trying to chime in now and trying to text Cecil or Nisa and let them know that they're sorry. And this happens over and over and over again. So addiction in its reality, here are 10 of the reality. We know about tobacco addiction, that's cigarettes and cigars. And as you know, over the last 10 years, there was a time when we were growing up, or when I was growing up, you could smoke in the stadiums, you could smoke in the bars, you could smoke everywhere. You can't smoke anywhere. There was a time there was smoking on the TV. And even they shut down the way they had Joe Camel look like a caricature of something so they could get kids to come and smoke. Alcohol, wines and spirits. As you know, in COVID, they left wine and spirits and liquor stores as essential. Don't ask me why, but you have that, and more people has been drinking because of the stress that's been going on. You have marijuana, you have painkillers, you have cocaine, you have heroin, and the last three a lot of people don't talk about that is happening is gambling. So now sports gambling has become big over the last couple of years. They even have a certification in gambling. You have sex addiction. So our church likes to talk about pornography, but it's more than that. There's a lot of men and women, but mostly men, who has sex addictions that has the path to have sex at their leisure and to disrupt their lives in addiction. And the last I will put is internet and gaming addiction. You'll be surprised. And internet addiction comes with social media. It also comes with gaming. And it also shows the amount of time you spend on the internet without doing your work. So I want those last three things to be put in your vocabulary, put in your mind, and our social workers will tell you within the next 3 or 4 years, this will become prominent. In fact, in my practice, about 4% to 8% of my practice have people with gambling, sex, and internet addiction. So we did talk about what we know is tobacco addiction. That is nicotine, cigarettes, cigars. They have mild side effects, but smoking has been a no-no to most of the society, wherein that people now look at smoking with a different eye through public health. We have helped with that, kind of like when we was growing up, you saw seat belts. Everybody lives with seat belts. There was a time that there was no airbags as for the safety, and this is the same thing for tobacco and addiction. So that's why you have a lot of vaping, because that's the alternative to tobacco addiction. So it is still around. I find it funny when I see people with their mask now, they take down their mask and they're smoking right now because they have to have a cigarette. Alcohol addiction. The big alcohol that we see is people drink Ciroc, people drink Hennessy. Those are some staples in our community where people do more than social drinking. In the evening, some people drink before 12 o'clock. Those are telltale signs of alcohol addiction. So I want you to understand that alcohol addiction has been around. It's a social acceptance. When you go to the ball game, you see people drinking beer. You notice that when you go to the ball game after the seventh inning or at the stadium, they stop selling drinks at a certain time. So it has been lobbied as an acceptable behavior. This is very tricky now. Growing up, marijuana was the wrong thing to do. And now marijuana is becoming accepted in our society where it's called something nicely as cannabis. People have their own dispensary. They're reversing people who are in jail, and they're reversing or commuting their sentence. Even though marijuana can impair physical performance and cognitive development, there's still a fight. In my own opinion, it looks like Black and brown individuals are still suffering with marijuana addiction, still getting the short side of the stick, where usually richer and white America is buying dispensaries and they're selling them for medical marijuana. And they have cards now where you could do that. So this is still a tricky place. But at the end of the day, as Seventh-day Adventist marijuana sometimes slows down the brain. And even though people say it's from the earth or what have you, it impairs your judgment. This is pretty new in Ohio, Nebraska, and the Midwest. Painkiller addiction. Those are your OxyContins. So with the rise of youth sports, there's a lot of kids and young people who do gymnastics and football. They get hurt and they get the medication and they get addicted to their painkillers. And, we found out there are certain painkiller companies that has been compliant and complicit in with doctors to push the painkillers. And after they use the painkillers, they want some more, and they become addicted. This is a big problem. This is why you have a lot of overdoses, and this has become a national problem and tied in with the opioid crisis. Cocaine, high level in the 90s, where some of our young people has parents or younger people has grown up in the 90s. Cocaine were for richer people. I remember as a big baseball fan in the 80s, it was big for the New York Mets, St. Louis Cardinals. My favorite player, Dave Parker, was into cocaine. And now, even though it's still there, the crack epidemic, crack and cocaine is the same thing, but we freebase it and it has this purer form and it becomes more addictive. So the crack epidemic has devastated the Black and brown community, and we are seeing some of the residual effects of that. So cocaine, there's a cocaine addiction there. We have our heroin addiction. So people who are artsy and in the music industry, and their heroin has a lot to do with HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, because you use a needle to use cocaine. That is the route of administration. And you could mix heroin with other substances. You can cut it with something else where you can get more of a high. What's big about heroin is that they're tied into methadone clinics that have synthetic opioids that hold the heroin addiction until you're supposed to get on your feet. And that has been a place of controversy. And there's still heroin addiction. It is still moving in this country. There are a lot of heroin overdoses. And once it was a black and brown disease, now it has also become an epidemic in this country. Not a pandemic, but a epidemic. Gambling. Gambling has one time been a dirty little secret. Parlors, poker late at night. Even when you go down to Atlantic City, but now Atlantic City and Las Vegas has now become a place that is okay to gamble and making it part of your life. And now that you have things like FanDuel and football has now accepted gambling as one of its revenue. FanDuel and those games will tell you it's a game of chance, but I'm going to tell you that it is gambling is what it is. When you take your money and you put it out there and you bet on something and you lose your money, it becomes addictive, it becomes a behavior, and it comes to a place where you start to lose your money and you start owing people money. In fact, that's what happens when you use cocaine, marijuana, or to a point, alcohol. So those are one of the telltale signs. There is a gambling addiction certificate that you can get, very hard to get, but gambling is a problem in this country, and it is going to be a bigger problem when you see the National Football League. They have their issues. I've worked with them before, but now when you see a football team move to Las Vegas, and now that they're open in Las Vegas, it's the gambling capital of the world. You can't gamble online in New York State, but you could go in Jersey and you could gamble on your phone. So this is something that we should look out in our next generation. We still have stigmatized and embarrassing for it because the winnings are so high. But when you lose money, you lose rent money, you lose phone bill money, and sometimes kids' tuition. Sex addiction, I'll spend a little time on this. And some of my, some of my reservations with the church, and a lot of people, when I come to their church, they want me to talk about porn addiction, pornography. But, the simple thing is that in pornography, you have, let's say you have football, baseball, and basketball. And all the money that football, baseball, and basketball and hockey has generated, pornography generates more than that. So I'll start with that. So that's just to tell you, everybody's watching it. Those are the days where you used to sneak away and have it in between your beds, and you wait till your parents go. You can get it on your phone. The Pornhub has taken the liberty of giving away free subscriptions during COVID. So you think about their master plan where this is concerned. So we want to be careful with that. There are people who think if they watch porn, they're in trouble. So they use an alternative of masturbation and excessive masturbations, sex with prostitutes. And one of the reasons why men have sex with prostitutes is not because they can't find sex from their wives or what have you. It's a matter of power, and it's a matter of anonymity. So the money exchange is not only for sex, the money exchange is for anonymity. So that goes on, and usually sex trafficking and human trafficking comes from prostitutes, where young women cannot fend for themselves. or if you're a drug addict or alcohol addict, or if you're a gambling addict and you need money, these are ways to turn around your money. So in that trade, you usually see a lot of women, they go to jail, and a lot of men steal. So men steal for their addiction. Women usually prostitute themselves. Now, this is somewhat anecdotal, but when you're in the streets, you kind of find that to happen. And so they are following their sexual impulses. The one thing about sexual addiction that even in my profession that gets me is you will never know who's doing it. I mean, some people was like, oh, Elder so-and-so is a creep or so-and-so. It's not them. It's somebody who's sitting next to you who is in church every Sabbath, your teachers, people who you admire. Those are the people that are suffering with sexual addiction. And the last one is internet and gaming addiction. I cannot tell you how many parents and wives, and so this is mostly a male demographic with gaming, between 3-2K, the basketball, the baseball, the war, Black Ops, Grand Theft Auto. On the women's side, Candy Crush. So the internet addiction is real, and the gaming addiction is real, especially now that gaming lures people to play for money, and they have their own leagues. So you see right now that baseball is not happening. So baseball have this tournament, and basketball have this tournament. So we need to look out with our young people that gaming is an issue, and internet addiction. So the internet, I look at it as surfing the internet, social media. Facebook are for older people, IG are for younger people, and then Twitter is for everybody. But mostly the internet, you now have TikTok that's sweeping the nation. And so everybody is involved with that. The gaming, it's in a class by itself. I can talk about that in length. It just steals away your youth and your time. And the last and not least is something we don't talk about, but we do talk about in the church, is food addiction, because nobody talks about it. Food is the biggest addiction because there's a lot of emotional eating. There's a lot of sugar in our food. There's a lot of additives that keeps us going over and over and over again. So you try go vegan for a week, or you try going vegetarian for a week, your whole body changes inside out. So there's people that eat when they're sad, and there's people who eat when they're happy. But most of all, food addiction is real. And it's something that we should talk about in the church more often. So, with all that said, the hurting of addiction destroys you long term. The hurting of addiction is degenerative. So you smoke, you see those commercials, it hurts you health-wise, and it hurts you physically. There are videos on YouTube that shows people who uses heroin or uses crack or alcohol, and they look beautiful. And 10 years later, you see the amount of times they get arrested over and over and over again. And then I could send that to you guys. You see how they're physically disfigured throughout. Loss of income. You don't get paid anymore. You miss too many days of work. You get fired. And loss of respect. And I talked about physical appearance. One more thing is that we talk about the fix. There is medication that can fix you. They have detoxing. They have medication that can help you get off of some of the addictions, along with behavior. That's where I come in. A lot of our counselors and a lot of our social workers work with that. And then we have therapy and counseling. But the most important thing, and I've seen this work with all of the therapies involved, once you get yourself committed to Christ and to work with it, it will and it can happen. I cannot express that enough. If you take it seriously and don't use your commitment as a cover up to your therapy, you will be successful. So, in conclusion, you want to use the opportunities to see qualified professionals. So a step below your qualified professionals is something that I admonish for people to use your AY leaders, and they bump it up to the Sabbath school teachers. Everybody who's listening or who goes to church has a Sunday school teacher, a Sabbath school teacher, or AY people that they really like. And there's nobody that hates young people, and they're willing to help and become that liaison between mother and father or a professional. Then it gets bumped up to your pastor. So a lot of pastors I've worked with, and they have referral to me or to other social workers that could put you into places and resources. Seek a buddy. Seek help from a like-minded person. So I'm going to use this forum, for instance. So, for instance, the person who would be closer to me and I'll be probably feeling closer to talk to is most likely Cecil. Cecil's from Brooklyn. We have common threads together. I may say to him, hey, dude, and you generally could touch somebody, or let's say Cecil and I go out to the game or we go bowling. One day I'm sure that will come, and he sees me come out and he sees me soak him. He's like, "Yo, Gary, I didn't know that you smoke." I said, Cecil, I'm really having an issue with this. And kind of like man has this bond that they're not going to blow up their spot per se. And you say, well, I know somebody that could do this or whatever. And it helps because in our small circle, Cecil knows that if Gary smokes, Cecil may have his own issues. And if it was vice versa, he would not want to be put in the same situation. So we always talk about the bad that happens, but there's always the good. Same thing like jobs. People say, Gary, I didn't know you did do that. I need somebody to come down to my church, or I need, I give you a case in point that they're hiring for what they call contact tracing. And that's been going on for public health for a long time. So it's like, I didn't know you could do that. I said, well, if you talk to this person or you talk to this person. So in contact tracing, you fill out the application, but what they don't tell you, there's a course on Johns Hopkins and Bloomberg that you take, because you have to take that course online. So these have these little secrets and these little things to help. So Cecil helps me, I help Cecil, and everybody helps themselves. The initial contact, even if it's shock, I say, look, I'm not going to say anything. I have my own issues too. How can I help? You can move on from there. Take inventory of yourselves. I bring back today, and I hope I don't bust anybody, but an excellent example of taking inventory of yourselves is what happened prior to this. Our speaker for today, he had his jacket on and his tie. We wanted to make sure the lighting goes together. And I had my jacket on and I had no tie, and I just had my shirt because I thought I was looking great AY time. And then Cecil didn't have a jacket on, and Cecil just had a shirt. Trust me, we all look presentable, handsome men or what have you. And then everybody said, okay, I'm going to go freshen up. And everybody freshened up, took inventory of themselves, and I upgraded to a tie. And then Cecil upgraded to a jacket. All because the rabbit, the speaker today, had his bow tie and his jacket on. And trust me, as handsome as we are, especially me, we look a little better and a little bit more presentable. That's the positive of taking inventory for yourself. And most of all, I just want everybody to see Christ, find a buddy. I just want to let you know we need to I'm not going to say overdo it, but let's take this time to meet our Savior. I'm going to be transparent. When my wife and my son was sick with COVID and I was crying out to pray to the Lord, one, I realized that there was somebody worse than me because somebody died. I'm just going to call it like that. And there's a lot of grief counseling going on. So my wife and son didn't die. But nevertheless, I suffered. And in my prayer, I laid out prostrate, whatever, kneel. I did everything. Lit candles, found new songs, found soaking on YouTube. And then I realized in my human form, I did not have the equity to cry out to my Creator. And that's where grace and mercy kicks in. I found out that I'm as much equity, little or big, I'm trying to build my equity. At the end of the day, it's grace and mercy that you may need for Christ to pull you over. We are still in this battle. And I want everybody to know that God is with you. So I want you to take the opportunity and let's go over and talk about some of these issues that we're having. We have great people on the panel. If you don't have a chance to talk, make sure, shameless plug, I will talk to you. You know, I have a group every night at 9:00 by invitation only. You don't have to pay. We talk about grief counseling, parenting, and the reason why it's at 9:00 is we have people on the West Coast and the East Coast. I do have my private practice. We have a men's prayer line at 8:00 every Thursday. And so we are still trying to be active. Let me say this as a counselor to everybody. Let me close and let me give you some hope. In the Bible, Joseph went through famine for 7 years. Okay. This COVID thing, to me, to a point, you are uncomfortable. There are people still waking up hungry in this country and around the world. There are people who lived in war-torn countries in Europe that if they went outside, they don't have no houses. They have no shelter. Some of us, we still have houses. We still have jobs. We still have shelters. And we're uncomfortable for 10 weeks. And now I'm calling out to you to retract your lives. I told my brother the other day, seriously, Paul, seriously, Pat, if everything was normal, how many times I would have seen you in the last 10 weeks? Maybe once. But because we're told that we can't do it, we are going through all of this. But then on the other side, there's some of us that have lost a lot of people, and some of us that have lost some connections. In fact, there are some new connections. I'm gonna, as we say, blow up our spot. I don't think I would have the admiration for Nisa and her business skills if it wasn't for COVID. I would have came to her church, done my presentation. We had the train tickets and everything, and she remixed it. I'm not going to say where she is, but she's where she is. And we moved on, negotiated brilliantly and what have you. But there's a bond. Cecil and myself has re-engaged, because if I could tell you, if this was regular, we wouldn't have been talking over the last couple of days. And I will surely call him or text him or what have you to let him know that, good luck. If you need anything in the next couple of weeks, if my brother act out of pocket, you can call me on June 6th and we'll take care of business. So I just want to conclude with that. And George, I want to let you know, keep up the good work. Lachelle, Tamisha, Sherla, And Larissa, I hope I got that right. I just want to thank you guys for having me here. So we can open the, I guess we could open the portals.
Well, we'll take thank you, Gary. We're going to take a commercial break now. We're going to have a special selection by Lachelle once again, and then we'll go into our question and answer.
This is my desire to honor you. Lord, with all my heart, I worship you. And all I have within me, I give you praise. All that I adore is in you. Lord, I give you my heart. I give you my soul. I live for you alone. Every breath that I take, every moment I'm awake. Lord, have your way in me. Lord, I give you my heart. I give you my soul. I live for you alone. Every breath that I take, every moment I'm awake. Lord, have your way in me. I love you. I love you. I love you, Lord, today because you care for me in such a special way. And yes, I praise you. I lift you up and I magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. Oh, I love you. I love you. I love you, Lord, today because you care for me in such a special way. And yes, I praise you. I lift you up and I magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. Oh, my heart, my mind, my soul belongs to you. You paid the price for me way back on Calvary. That's why I praise you. I lift you up and I magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. Oh, that's why I praise you. I lift you up and I magnify your name. That's why my heart is filled with praise. Every breath that I take, every moment I'm awake. Lord, have your way in me.
Amen. Thank you, Lachelle, for those beautiful renditions. Now I'll be introducing our moderator. George Morgan Jr. is a master guide from Mount Zion Seventh-day Adventist Church. He attends Quinnipiac University School of Law and is a third-year law student. At Quinnipiac Law, George is currently the president of the Student Bar Association, the student liaison of the Connecticut Bar Association, the legal research assistant of Professor Marilyn Ford, a member of his school's mock trial team, and a student ambassador. He has worked on the Racial Justice Project with the Center for Children's Advocacy, attended the 17th World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates, and hosted a virtual tour of Quinnipiac Law. Outside of local school involvement, George is the regional chair of the Northeast region of the National Black Law Students Association. As the chair, he oversees the 33 law schools in the Northeast spread across 9 states. In his downtime, George can be found playing intramural softball with his colleagues. Now, hear him, George Morgan Jr.
Thank you, Nisa, for that introduction. Yes, I do play softball, and I am actually fairly good at softball. Never hit a home run, but I made it home, so, I scored. That's what matters. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like you all to pay attention to your screens. If you haven't already seen so, there's going to be a number scrolling around, so please send in those questions so we can hit our panelists nice and hard. So, to start, we have Tanisha Burton. Tanisha is a licensed independent clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience in community and human services. Tanisha currently works as a child and adolescent therapist for a hospital outpatient behavioral health clinic. She has served in settings including substance abuse and child welfare residential programs, in-home and outpatient clinics, and crisis call centers, engaging clients ranging from children to adults. Also, Tanisha is a self-published author and spoken word poet. She was the AY leader at her church from 2016 to 2018, current member of Shiloh Springfield, and the New England South Compassion Coordinator. Next, we have Shirla Morris, who is a licensed social worker in the state of Alabama and serves as a family therapist for a nonprofit. She currently works to provide counseling to women and their children that have been victims of domestic violence and are working through healing from this trauma. She is a graduate from Oakwood University and received her master's degree from the University of Alabama. Shirla is someone that loves the Lord with all her heart and has served in various ministries to support the gospel, including, but not limited to, Bible work, coal portering, volunteering at soup kitchens and homelessness shelters, leading Bible studies and worship. She's very involved in the church. Lastly, we have Dr. Leslie Valbrun. He is a strategist, an entrepreneur, and a leader focused on the economic growth and development of the community. He serves in various roles as he aims to positively influence his community while leaving a lasting legacy for generations to come. He's the Economic Development Chair for the NAACP of Bridgeport, and Dr. Valbrun is an elder at Bridgeport Tabernacle SDA Church in Bridgeport, where he also serves as the Director of Education. So he's building that legacy already, but there's more. Dr. Valbrun earned a Bachelor's of Science in Biology, a Master's of Public Health with a concentration in health promotion and education, and a doctorate in chiropractic practices. He served as an associate professor at the University of Bridgeport College of Chiropractic Teaching, Orthopedic Neurology, and Orthopedics. That was a mouthful. He is currently a practicing chiropractor and in the process of achieving board certification in neuromusculoskeletal orthopedics. So, as you can see, all three of our guests have built a legacy around serving the community and serving the church. So my first question for our panelists, I am addicted to veggie patties. That's just the truth. From Golden Crust, I can't help myself. So I try to limit how many of them I buy and how often I get them. Based on what the original Graham, or OG, said in his presentation, addiction is something that disrupts our lives. So if that's the case, is it possible to disrupt our lives with positive addictions, or do addictions have to be negative? Some examples I thought of were reading the Bible, practicing piano, and throwing my mom under the bus, Candy Crush. She uses it to decompress, so I figure it should be okay. But what do you think, panelists? We'll start with Tanisha, just so that we don't have too much overlap in voices.
That is a wonderful question, George. But for me, I would say personally, the definition of addiction is something that you are dependent on, and over time it impairs your life. Like, you spend more time trying to seek after the thing that you are obtaining rather than socializing, rather than bettering yourself in a positive way. So even a positive, quote unquote, addiction could be detrimental because some people are addicted, so to speak, to exercise, but it can teeter on the edge of becoming a negative thing if it starts to consume more and more time. That's my response.
Thank you. And Shirla?
Yes, so that's, like I said, I want to agree with you guys. That's a great question, and I want to agree with Tanisha. Anything done excessively, even though it's good, can become bad. You know, I can say drinking water is healthy, but then I start drinking so much that I get bloated, I get sick. It disrupts my very functioning. So anything done excessively can lean on the side of being toxic, and it could cause a disruption in our ability to function and perform and serve and to do what we're doing. And it could be something that can innocently start off in that direction, but grow into something that's really bad. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your answers. So going off of that question then, so what about me and my patty addiction? Would you say that's an addiction? Because I personally do think it's an addiction when I have a patty in front of me. I just need to eat it. They're just so good. But I guess that's not the right use of the addiction.
When you say you're addicted to it, if you were to measure that addiction, like how often do you eat this patty? How often are you getting it? Is it causing you to not pay a bill because, oh my God, I'm investing so much in this patty? Is this all that's in your cupboard to eat? Like how would you measure it?
See, no, I'm glad you said that. I'm not even going to answer that because, to be honest, I'm going to answer it. I don't eat them that often, and that's the funny thing about it, and that's kind of why I was playing devil's advocate with my question.
So the question is there a veggie patty in front of you right now?
Exactly. See, there's not, and that's why
Now, the second question is, did you eat a veggie patty today?
I did, but that's only because we had them, you know.
Okay,
we don't get them.
So I guess what everybody's trying to say is, if I take some blood work, and this is basically, we take some blood work, we find out, like the doctor said, man, you're eating too many veggie patties. This is what is disrupting your life. But I think it's safe to say that the fact that you don't have a veggie patty in front of you, in a way, and I say this kind of jokingly, but truthfully, and then while I was speaking, were you eating veggie patties?
Nope.
You're good.
Thank you all for your answers. I wanted to get to the bottom of what addiction is, because OG touched on it in his presentation, but I know a lot of people, especially my age group, there are these misnomers as to what addiction really is, and it really does come down to how it disrupts your life. So thank you for those responses. One of our guests sent in a question asking, what are your thoughts, panelists, about the safe using centers that have become popular in some states to combat addicts who are using and or sharing dirty needles? Are they doing more harm than good, or is there a place for these safe using centers? And we could start with Shirla this time.
Can you repeat your question, George?
Sure. So the question is about safe using centers, the centers where people are going to combat addiction from using and sharing dirty needles. Do you believe, Shirla, that these are doing more harm than good, or do you think that there's a place for safe using centers?
Okay, so what I know of it is what I've heard through the news. I haven't delved into research into these safe centers per se, but I did do some like listening to the news, and I heard about how some people are being exploited by these centers. Now, I don't want to speak on every center because, again, that is not necessarily my area of expertise, but I do know that at the end of the day, you have to go into something with people who, at the core of it, they actually do want to help you. If they've created a business to exploit, then they're going to take advantage of people. But if the business is tailored with ethics that they're actually invested in supporting people, then they're going to go above and beyond to ensure that they're not doing anything that could work counterintuitive to what they're trying to do. So at the end of the day, I mean, it's all about discernment, because you can have something that, again, is healthy, but it's okay, not healthy. It's okay, but then it's marketed in such a way that it's beneficial when it's not beneficial. So I'm thinking back onto, like, for instance, the introduction of Coke, the soda, right? It was marketed in such a way that it targeted some people, but it had an addictive component to it, right? And it was sold to the masses because these people were trying to make money. That's the kind of country we're living in, right? But at the end of the day, it's not, their goal was not necessarily to help people. It was just to sell a product. Sometimes people create businesses, even in the healthcare setting, in the healthcare environment, in the mental health setting, where their goal is just to make money. Even though they're targeting and they're selling this mission, this vision, sometimes we can be exploited by people that are seeking to do good or presenting to do good, but are not necessarily doing so. So you just have to do your research and explore and ask questions and see, I mean, if you could find out any reviews that are positive and negative, and then make a decision about what you want to do.
Thank you, Shirla. And Tanisha, what do you think?
I definitely feel like, first of all, it's two schools of thought. With addiction, you have the abstinence-only model and then the harm reduction model. The abstinence-only model was proven, and I don't know the stats, and Brother Graham, you can help me out here, but the abstinence-only model was shown to not work as effectively, so therefore we shifted over to the harm reduction model. And the wellness centers, or the healthy use centers, are a form of the harm reduction, in that we can reduce a lot of public health ills, such as the spread of infectious diseases through the use of sterile needles and such, and clean utensils, and be in a safe space, because you also have the use of Narcan as a tertiary measure to help people when they do overdose. So this is kind of, it falls right between preventative and tertiary care, because we're trying to prevent you from overdosing by allowing you to use these substances helpfully, but also we have Narcan available if you overdose, and then we have, to deter you from overloading the ER with this substance abuse issue. So I don't know. I don't have any real... Actually, I'm still questioning my own thoughts on this. It can be helpful, but in the whole scheme of things, do people utilize them as much as they utilize illicit use? That's a question that we have to ask, because if the goal is to decrease illicit drug use in a harmful manner, is it actually doing that? So I'd love to see the numbers on that.
Thank you, Tanisha. Dr. Graham, did you want to touch on that at all?
Future Dr. Graham. But I have to agree with Tanisha and Shirla. So that is the harm reduction model. They're absolutely right that if it was abstinence only, it would be a problem for public health. So I'm going to say two things that it'll show you exactly what you mean. Okay. So if there were no condoms, everybody would be pregnant. Condoms is a harm reduction model, okay? Let me bring it a little bit home. Social distancing that we're practicing now, if we did not social distance, because nobody likes to social distance, and on top of that, nobody likes to put on the mask. So statistics shows over the last 10 weeks, if you put a mask on and if you social distance, it will decrease the infection rate. So the reason why we have safe spaces and clean needles is because even though people do not like addicts or people who live outside of the addiction world, if they didn't have it, they would be infecting people outside of the world. That's what it becomes to. Now, Charlotte said something that's really important, is that there's a capitalist point of view with this. By having a safe place, you have a building, you employ doctors, nurses, and you also employ counselors. So everybody wins. It's statistically shown that the infection rate goes down. So you marry public health along with mental health and substance abuse. So the Republican side of me don't like it, but the human side of me loves it because it gives people a chance to get their lives together.
Thank you. Thank you. So kind of branching off of this question a little bit, breaking an addiction starts with prayer. We know that. So what's next for those who want to get help, but they don't want to go to a professional because they might have shame, like you were saying before, OG? What do you suggest for those people after they've done praying and even, fasting as well, if they want to fast? We can start with Graham. No, yeah, okay. Actually, I want to start with you.
So nobody wants to see me because there is and the ladies will agree with me, there's a stigma to having your kids or yourself seeing a counselor. So I'm going to just say this straight. Our people who are non-Black and brown, they have a therapist and they go see them every time. I'm just going to just let you know. And we have the power, George and Lachelle and Cecil, you come to me and you tell me that you can't go to work because you're mentally strained. I can write a letter like a doctor to tell you not to go to work. So our white counterparts utilize, and the insurance pays for it. So let me just say, so the same way you go to the doctor, the insurance pays for any of us to do the work. But we're so worried about what the next elder is going to think about us, or somebody in Sabbath school or Cradle Roll think about us. You only putting yourself in deeper trouble. So if you don't want to see any of us, the first thing I will tell you to see is you need to talk to your friend or somebody you trust. That's why I use the story about, so one of the things that I use is I have two brothers and some of us have siblings. And I tell people, you want to find out the truth that's going on with your child? Go to the sibling. They may not say anything. One sibling may have somebody's hurt and answers. The other sibling knows what's going on. And they talk amongst each other. A lot of siblings share bedrooms. A lot of trades take place. They see their hurt or their wants or their needs. And then also the parent knows, or they're afraid to tell the parent. So you have to talk to somebody, because if you don't talk to anybody, the next person you talk to, somebody who doesn't care about you, i.e. the drug dealer or somebody who wants to get you into trouble, is just have harm set up for you.
Oh, thank you very much. Shirla, do you want to discuss kind of how to break an addiction after one starts praying, once they've gotten past that first step?
I mean, definitely, I agree with OG. I was going to say Dr. Graham. Definitely, I do want to mention the stigmas also that's attached to it. But I think, like you said, talking to somebody else, whether it's someone in your circle, they can also be a great source of releasing some of that frustration, and they can also help guide you to the counselors. We are staples in the community, and we can really, really impact you, but it's just about helping process the trauma. Everything we're doing is because of how we think. And if we are able to understand our thought process in a non-judgmental setting that's safe, just like the addictive centers, in a center where you can, or a place that you can, really just talk through your issues to people that are trained to handle your trauma, then I think that will be the next step. I think that we can also, we give out and we suggest tools and ways in which people can find ways to redirect their thoughts so they're not coped up in whatever they're doing. So being able to, if you're, for instance, I'll keep using your little addiction to the patties, right? So for instance, I would say, if you know that, identify what it is. If you know that the patties is the thing that you're addicted to, don't fill up your cupboard with it. So, because then you're inviting that addiction and you're now putting yourself where you're even more vulnerable. It's like guarding the avenues to where that addiction is coming in, so that you can protect yourself. There are situations we get into we can't help, but then there's sometimes we think about things. And so how can we prepare ourselves so that we're not surrounded by that addiction? If an addiction is with my friends, then I need to evaluate my friends so that I'm not surrounding myself with people who are going to lead me in that specific direction. So I think we also have to think about our environments, our social circles, who we're talking to, and find ways in which to redirect our thought process so that we're not consumed by this thing. Or sometimes we can like replace it with something else, you know, something perhaps that's not toxic, you know, and then or give ourselves, sorry, I know other people have to talk, but give ourselves like rewards for successes, like, and give ourselves simple challenges as opposed to saying, I'm just going to cut this out today. I'm not going to do this. And then reward myself for successfully ending the day without doing this. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do know what you're saying, Shirla. So thank you for that answer. So basically you're telling us we should condition ourselves in a sense to break those addictions. And I like that answer as well. So thank you very much. And lastly, we have Tanisha. So what do you think?
I loved it. Shirla covered almost all the bases, you know, just like in recovery circles, you have to change people, places, and things. That's the first thing they tell you. You can't go back to old habits expecting to do new things, and reducing exposure and changing your recreational activities, substituting more, just to use the words, less toxic, positive, pleasurable activities. But I would also say, going back to the first step, speaking as the person who you may be approached as, remember the importance of, first of all, I support godly counsel. So after you've done all you could, reach out to someone in your support system, and you as that person, remember the importance of trust and confidentiality when you're dealing with people who are at a point where they're willing to expose their vulnerabilities to you. Because even if you are in a relationship or have a close friend, this may still be something that you don't even know about them. Because usually with addiction, unless you're so far gone, you're trying to keep up a good front. You're trying to keep this thing masked. You're being a functional addict. So remember to be confident. Remember to keep confidentiality, and to be that person that this individual is entrusting you with their secrets, or exposing you before you, again, shift them to maybe more professional help, with no stigma. Like, mental health is still health.
Thank you, Tanisha. So we have a commercial break coming up soon. So we have an interesting question. I say interesting in the sense that it's nice that, what was that, Tanisha? Go ahead. Were you about to say something? Okay, maybe that might have just been me. So a lot of time in church, we're afraid to talk about such things as sex addiction and stuff like that. It's a hard topic to talk about. So we have a question. It's a two-part question. One, how long does it take for someone to become or to be considered addicted to pornography? And the second half of the question is, are there programs to rehabilitate someone from porn addiction? So I think for this one, maybe we could start with OG again, since this was in your presentation.
So So porn addiction is, let me put it this, sex addiction is a little different, wherein that it's part of our lives. Everybody is attracted to somebody. So I will go down and I will find that if you see certain acts in pornography and you're looking for something to top some acts, so I'm just speaking as an adult now. So I'm just putting it in a simple, if you see two people kissing in pornography and you are looking for something to top that, and then you find something to top that, and then you need another act to top that, and you keep on trying to top that, those are telltale signs of addiction. And how often it happens. So it's a twofold thing. How often and how intense it goes on. It goes on. Now, the third part of that is how you want to act that out. So you see something in pornography and then you say to yourself, well, I want to act it out. So then you find your friends and your girlfriends and you can't find somebody to do that. So then you pay for that act to be acted out. And it turns into a vicious cycle. So I'm sure my therapist will let me know that just like everything else. So one thing I knock about churches who are very, not only Seventh-day Adventists, but all churches, is that they single out pornography as the only problem, but they do not single out how men treat women at church. Or, there's men at church that will go to young ladies and say, hey, I'll pay for this and I'll pay for that. All of that falls into the sexual addiction scheme of things. So you're about to ask a question, but you could bring it on. I'll let you know straight up. I can't hear you.
Yes, I noticed. Yeah, so this is perfect because some of the things you're saying have really struck some, I wouldn't say a nerve, but they've really got some people thinking. So you talked about that climb, that kind of pursuit. So someone asked, if they were to look at pornography involving the same gender, are they considered gay? And this is a good question for people in our faith.
So there's a part in everybody's lives, and I'm not going to skim around this or what have you. If that does not mean that you're gay. Okay, so this is just my thing, because when you look at pornography, or let's say for instance, it takes 60 days to build a Hyundai. It takes 6 months to build a Rolls Royce. I drive a car, and sometimes it's natural human feelings to see something different, whether it's wrong or it's right. So there's no intensity in that. So I sit down and somebody says, oh, he's automatically gay because he sees two men kissing or two women kissing or what have you. That doesn't define you as gay. There's a whole lifestyle. There's a whole way people goes around about certain things. Before I'm married, because I spoke to somebody, I use Alabama, somebody from Alabama, doesn't mean I like Southern girls. It doesn't mean I like certain girls. You got to find that out and find that for yourself. Now, going on the gay issue, because that question is not only a loaded question, that question is going to lead to something else. Now, I see you start watching gay porn 3 months, and you start acting it out, and you start dressing it out, or you start acting out what you see and starting the culture, then, you're not gay until you define yourself as gay. Because there are men that kiss men and women that kiss women and women that do, and they don't say that. So there's so many definitions behind that. And I'm not trying to cop out. That's another story for another day. I could even break it down and say, like, look, some people say, I don't date black women. I'm a black man. But, they marry somebody white or outside of their race. And they say, oh, we're part of the human race. But you're dating somebody out of your race. So part of it is what they define themselves as, and part of it is what society defined themselves as. But at the end of the day, I'll go back to your question. You see things, it doesn't define you at the first time. It doesn't define you at the second time. You may like it the third time, but it still doesn't define you. It takes time for you to define who you are.
Okay, so thank you very much. Do we have any, well, we have 2 minutes before our commercial break. So Sherla, would you like to possibly touch on this at all? Or I could touch on it as well if you'd like.
I was about to say my facial reactions are too much. I need to tone it down because
No, you're fine.
The invitation.
Fine. I like that. We're definitely getting a lot of questions right now, and I like that we're having this open discussion. I think this is beautiful that we're having this as Adventists, because I feel like growing up in the church, there were a lot of times where we had AY and they were really great programs, but there was a certain level that we didn't dig.
Right.
And I think having the discussion doesn't mean that anyone, we're all sinners. So I think having the discussion is definitely the best thing we can do, is provide a safe space, even if it's virtual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think this has been amazing so far. And please, everyone who's watching, keep the questions coming. I see them here. I've got them here, and we're going to make sure we get to them.
Okay, so going back to the first question about how do I know I'm addicted? I think that was the question, something along those lines.
Yes, the question was, how long does it take to be considered an addict in that context?
So it's definitely the same as when we first addressed what is addiction. It's that thing that it goes back to, is this something that disrupts my life? Is this something I've now become dependent on, something that I'm doing? We could be doing it unconsciously, consciously, but it is something. And there are functioning addicts, but it's something that, we are invested in, so much so that it could become an idol, that if we don't get it, there's a emptiness that we feel because, oh my God, I didn't do something. Now, when it comes to, let's talk about pornography and this type of addiction specifically, these types of addictions are usually done in secrecy, especially when it comes to the people of God in the church. It's a secret sin. People are not aware of it. You go great lengths so no one is aware that this is happening, but it's something that you're doing, you're sneaking and doing, you're living a dishonest, a double lifestyle. And if it's something that, if you should know you're in a situation, if you're going above and you're scared that anyone finds out, it's one thing to stumble across some type of pornography because social media, the internet, it is easy. You could put in something about cat and end up seeing something else.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's just, you can't help it. Images come. But if you are now tapping in and looking and that it goes another way, and then you look at it, you linger there, but then now all of a sudden, every time you get a chance by yourself with your phone, with a computer, no one's around, cat. Then I think that is evidence that you're now in a situation where it's becoming addictive. I wouldn't say you're addicted, but it's becoming addictive. If it's past, I would say a certain amount of time, it could be, I would say 3 months. But that's just my personal opinion. Then I'm like, now you're blown into this situation. You're fully invested. Going back to the question of, is it, if you watch gay pornography, are you gay? Is that the question? All right. So, of course, this is touchy, especially in the church realm, because we don't talk about stuff like this. We glaze over it, but like the Bible says, a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So you think to yourself, if you are, because I would say someone isn't something till they're engaging in the act, right? So I wouldn't say someone is gay unless they're having gay sex, I wouldn't say, I'm not done yet, Tanisha. I saw your face, I saw it, but I would say I wouldn't label someone something unless they're doing the action of it. I wouldn't say someone is a liar because they're thinking about lying. I wouldn't say someone is a thief because they had a thought process to steal something, until you do the act, you're not the thing. You see what I'm saying? But at the same time, we have to recognize that we are responsible for our thought process, and they are the things that determine our character. You know, if I'm thinking about some being violent in my area of expertise, I work with domestic violence. If I'm an abuser and I'm thinking of ways of how to attack my significant other, but I'm not acting it out, there's something going on there that needs to be worked out. Or if I'm under some type of influence, I have a vulnerable day, that action is going to manifest itself. And then we are responsible for that action. If you are somebody that's lingering and continuing, you're inviting now yourself into a situation that once you go there, it's hard to come back from. But I'm not saying just because someone has had an act that I'm going to now define them by that act. I don't see someone who has lied and say, every time I see them, I'm a liar. I call a person by their name. And I don't think we should be putting labels on people because we shouldn't be confined to an action or act in a moment. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I've talked enough.
No, Shirla, that was great. And I wanted to have a follow-up question with you because someone asked, what is the difference between spicing things up and getting hooked? And you touched on that 3-month, window. So they're not talking specifically about anything other than addiction in this question, but the difference between spicing things up and getting hooked.
When he or she says spicing it up, like spicing it by watching some porn versus...
It might have been related to pornography because of the timing of the question, but they didn't specify the subject.
Back to the scripture, as a man thinks his heart, so is he. There's no way on this platform I'm going to say it's okay to be watching porn. there's no way,
Right.
But the marital bed is undefiled. Now, if you and your partner would like to video yourselves and watch it in the future for references, by all means, do you. But I'm not going to say on this platform.
You belong on CNN and MSNBC. That's a great answer. But I hear where you're going. Right. Yep.
All right, Tanisha, so now we're going to swing it over to you because you've been with the facials. So let's, I guess we'll go back to the top and work our way down. So for now, we've got, are there programs to rehabilitate from porn addiction? How long does it take to be considered an addict in that context? Those questions.
Wow, you're throwing them all at me. I'm not the softball player. You are, George. So I would say, first of all, yes, there are programs for addiction. Almost any type of addiction, there are programs for. If it's defined as addiction, there's treatment for it. So definitely do your research to find out the how good it is and how good the outcomes are. That's what I would say to that one. And I believe the second question was, how long does it take to become addicted to something? Again, just very similar to what everyone has been saying. It depends on how much time you're spending, how it is impairing you. And I kind of want to skip over to the addiction to the porn and the sex addict type stuff. For me, when we're thinking about the anatomy of addiction, we're also thinking about the endorphins, the reward system, the pleasure system that gets triggered when we're engaging in certain acts. So what Shirla was describing, like just, that secretive behavior, if there are, your heart is racing, there's endorphins going at how excited you're going to be at the thought of seeing these images. How much time now are you spending trying to find time to see these images in quiet and seclusion? Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. But one thing I wanted to touch on was the gay versus not gay from watching porn. For me, my only thought that I wanted to insert, I come from a trauma-informed lens. You have a lot of people who have been transgenerational trauma, meaning someone has molested them, and so the cycle continues, and you have a lot of individuals who have sought to figure out what has occurred to me. I'm not generalizing, but I am going to use males as an example. You have young males who have been molested by an older individual, more likely a male. And so they're going to perpetrate that behavior, not knowing anything about sexual identity. So no, I'm not going to call you or identify you as gay. And like Brother Graham said, it is up to how you label yourself, but also coming from the Christian perspective, we are to call sin, sin. So while we don't want to label people, we want to remember, because a lot of people, a lot of Black males, which is why the rate of HIV and AIDS went up for Black women, is because these men did not identify themselves as gay men and they were having gay sex, but coming home to their heterosexual partner now infecting them, as opposed to identifying themselves as bisexual, engaging in, or no labels, but I engage in gay sex. So it's about being honest with the sin that we are caught up in and calling sin, sin.
Thank you, panelists. All of you did a great job. I love that we have varying perspectives, but I think there is one thing that has been touched on, and it's that we don't want to judge anyone, that it is, we're not trying to put a label on someone because of a one-time thing or anything like that. And I think we have a lot of great perspectives in that, in how we got to that one answer. So right now we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back. How long, Cecil, do you think we should take a break for? 2 minutes? More than that? Less than that? I think 2 minutes is a...
I'm about 3 minutes or less. We're showing the video right now.
All right. Sounds good. We'll see you all in 3 minutes.
Am I still muffled?
I just brought you here to let you know that I'm homosexual.
That's terrible. I'm disgusted right now. Repulsed. Honestly. That's so disgusting. You didn't just tell me that. Born and raised Christian, and now you're gay. That's so gay. That's terrible, man. Your mom would be disgusted. I'm telling her. I'm calling her right after this, matter of fact. It's a beautiful thing, and you're just being negative. Matter of fact, I can't even eat. I can't eat right now. Pay for it.
I'm homosexual.
Wait. What did you say? Homosexual? SDA? Homosexual? Them have that? No, Bridget. You can't do that. No. Hey, baby. How you doing? You gonna come by? It's gotta be within 1 hour, baby. You know my husband comes home soon. I love you more. Woo. All right now. Find yourself a good gal, man. Find yourself a good gal. Man, you disgust me, You disgust me. Chop.
I'm gay.
So how you feel about that?
You fine?
It's cool. For you, I guess. So, I gotta go. No owe you for the food, but I ain't really got no money right now. Kind of strapped, so you know what, man? You're disgusting.
I just wanted to tell you that I'm gay.
Okay. Now you know I'm a Christian, and you know I don't really support that lifestyle, but you're my friend. That will never change. Since we're friends, I really hope you're gonna let me tell you about what I believe, and I want to hear what you believe.
Put your smile on my face. I've got a love that overflows, never runs out of grace, and I'ma hold on tight. Represent the king, so I better live right. Do all the things pleasing in his sight. Stay so close like dark on night, like day on light, like Chuck on a mic. Yes, closer than I ever been before. Ever on my eye, you don't want that.
So, welcome back to the final portion of our panel tonight. We have a lot of questions to go through, so I'm going to switch up the gears a little bit, and we're going to kind of do kind of like a lightning round. I'm going to ask one panelist, or maybe just put it out for the panelists. We'll do a variety on these questions. So the last question I got, what are the dangers of masturbation? So in 2 minutes or less, I'd like to ask Dr. Valbrun, since we have you, thank you for being here. Could you hit on that question for us?
Sorry. Some of the dangers of masturbation, number one is it causes you to have an association in relation to sex. Okay. So there's this thing called central sensitization. All right. Here's what it means. There's a pathway in your brain that develops, and it consistently understands and knows the more that you train it, the more that you do with it, it will remain in your mind, right? So you're associating a certain thing with, let's say, masturbation. Usually it's porn. That's just the honest truth. And that association can actually affect your relationships in the future. How does it affect your relationships, you might ask? Well, here's the thing. During sex, what does happen is there are certain people who, for whatever reason, they just can't be stimulated by the person that they're actually with. And what happens is somebody will have to look at porn so that they can feel stimulated, because it becomes like a drug, and it's something that constantly will affect your neurochemicals to the point where, that's what you'd rather do that than actually have sex in general. So it may not affect you right now, but down the line in the future, it absolutely will affect you. I don't know if that answers the question enough, but that's just a snippet.
I think that answers the question. I think a touch of neurology was definitely what we needed on that. So thank you very much. We're going to hit this next question. Is it better to have a food addiction or a gambling or drug addiction? Now, Shirla, I see your face. I promise this was not my question. This is not me. But I'm going to ask you, Shirla, to answer this. What do you think is better? Quote, end quote.
Listen, both of these are bad, okay? Both addiction in any form is not good. I would say it's not good. I definitely think the drug addiction, it's more dangerous in terms of its ability to really affect your ability to function and to work and to just live in society. But when it comes to the food, it's more dangerous in that it's easily accessible.
Mm-hmm.
With drugs, you might have to go out of your way to find it, or meet some characters. Whereas with food, everywhere you go. And so both have are intense, and both are very addictive, and both are bad if indulged excessively. But one is absolute no-no. But then again, sorry, as I say drugs, I mean, like, of course, there are drugs that are approved, and they're specific for certain things, and they're helpful. But at the same time, anything done in excess can become dangerous. So I don't want to make a general drug. I'm talking about drugs that are illegal, and that might be something that in society can really destroy your life.
Thank you, Shirla. And also other panelists, if you want to hop on any of these questions, I'm going to do lightning right now, just a one-on-one. But if you want to add on, feel free and just add on before the next question.
Can I add on to
I see
that one? So here's the thing with Actually, I just wanted to add on to a little bit of what I was saying before, even with the food addiction, the gambling, and even with masturbation, for example. What happens is with food addiction, people can't really smell it for the most Christian wise, right? People can't really smell like a food addiction, right? But we can see the results of a food addiction, okay? With masturbation, for example, you can't smell it, you can't touch it. It's not something that you can see directly, and so it's well hidden. And that's one of the things that people with addictions, they want to hide in plain sight as much as they can. So there is that association there as well. But no addiction is good. Period.
Perfect. So that actually segues into another question we have, which is right here. Is addiction based solely on one's actions or their state of mind? And this is honestly, whoever wants it can answer this. So based solely on action or their state of mind?
I would say both. I would say, okay, so you can't say both with that question, but state of mind is a big part because it can take up so much of your space, your mental space. And that's what God and the devil are fighting for, our brain space and our worship to a certain degree. So I guess I would say that it starts in the mind first and then the body follows. So the mind is probably a more dangerous thing if I had to give a specific answer on that.
Tanisha, Tanisha, I would have to agree with you there. See, what ends up happening is that we take our circumstances and our situations and we want to compartmentalize. See, that's where the problem begins. How do we actually deal with our issues at a core root level? And generally, a lot of these addictions will start when we're really young, when we're developing. It's not something that you can notice like right away, but over time it develops to a place where it becomes a part of you in a sense. And now to reverse that, it's difficult. So sometimes to break an addiction usually takes anywhere from 14 to 21 days. Like neurologically, that's usually what it is. But it doesn't just go away, right? It stays there. But you have to fill it in with positive things in order to kind of move away from it. But it is definitely in the mind for sure.
Thank you both. Switching gears a little bit, I was told that marijuana helps relax and helps with pain. So what is wrong with occasional use? I'm seeing a lot of nodding with Dr. Balbrin. Do you want to touch on this one too?
Sure. So, okay. So full disclosure, okay. With some of my patients, I do tell them like, hey, if this is what's working for you, by all means, go for it. Okay. I do not condone the use of drugs outside of a medicinal purpose, whether it's herb, whatever the case is, natural. If it's not for a medicinal purpose, I don't really stand behind it. Now, does it relax people? Yeah, it does. It's a psychedelic drug, just like alcohol relaxes people too, but people act a fool with that too, right? So anytime we use something to get away from our present reality that causes a chain reaction of whatever, okay, to fill in the void or to fill in some emptiness, it is going to be a problem. It can be used, it can be abused. So is marijuana inherently bad? Absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with it. It grows naturally. Now, the use is what the problem, the use is where we have problems. Recreationally, I'm not for it because it can affect you in a variety of different ways.
I also want to add to that. So a lot of individuals, they self-medicate with marijuana because of the relaxing component, because it's not seen on the same level as certain other drugs. But at the same time, most of the times when you do most people, a lot of our people, Black and brown people, people in general, they have a lot of trauma. And people deal with their traumas in different ways. And some people, in order to not deal with their trauma, they drink, they smoke, they do whatever, and it helps them to calm down, it helps them to relax, but it does not cure or deal with the root of what's affecting them. So helping them to understand the need for just, you can have medication such as cannabis that is incorporated in a way to help you, but you have to get the counseling you need to understand the root of your issues. So you're just not doing something to just cover your issues to feel better in the moment, but in order to help you through whatever you went through that caused you to now feel like you need this thing so you can have peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. There's not much I could add on to that all, but can you be free from your addiction if you don't get to the root cause of your addiction?
I think everybody's going to agree with me. No.
Yeah.
Addiction goes as far as some. I think Tanisha would agree with me with this. A lot of addictions and a lot of behavioral issues starts with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with small. I'm going to talk about today. I worry for the kids in the elementary school ages now. And when COVID passes away, they're going to remember, we used to wear masks. So, there will be in the future, there'll be smoke and a mask will happen. Another thing I was explaining to my son in 2001 when the Twin Towers were destructed, and there's people, why do we celebrate the Twin Towers? A lot of our lives are filled with trauma. Let me put a little icing on this cake where it is. A lot of us live in the Northeast, even though I live in New York City, and some people here on this panel and are watching are from Connecticut on the tri-state area. There's some overflow for it. So for somebody even like myself, who is a mature gentleman now, I like to think so, and I'm going to use Cecil again, who's from Brooklyn or whatever, when you hear things like Starrett City had the most people die in New York City, and then you hear things like Co-op City, that's home to us.
Mm-hmm.
And if God allows us to stay on this earth another 20 years, just like 20 years ago, 9/11 had his impact on us, it will have an impact on us. This is just to say, and I'm just adding a lot of things to say, the bottom line is no addiction, all addictions start with some type of initiates from trauma, all of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you very much. Can church become a disruption, thus an addiction, even though God is the joy and the strength of our lives? So yeah, they quoted the song.
So yes, actually church can be an addiction. There is an addiction. Interestingly, I can't remember the name, but you guys can look it up. Just go right on Google, addicted to church, and you'll find the proper name for it. Now, the issue is, what is church? Is it a surrogate for something else? Right? Like, believe it or not, during this COVID-19, I felt bad for some of the kids because they just don't like their families. I'm just keeping it real. And the thing is, not everybody's home life is a good home life, right? So then how do you now deal with that struggle? And believe it or not, there's a lot of church folks who don't even like their own families. Okay. And so they're busy during the week. And then when it comes time to church, they're busy in the entire weekend, and they don't spend time with their family. So yes, doing church work can be an addiction. However, there's a difference between the spiritual and just doing the church work, right? It's your intentionality. It's where your mind and your heart is. And hey, look, only God knows the heart.
Did anyone want to add on to that?
I pretty much was going to say the same thing that he ended with. It's your motivation, it's your intention. What is your motivation for going to church? If it becomes something that you want to be seen, you want to be engaged in things that are distractions that are taking you away from negative circumstances, then yes, it can be a very addictive thing. If you are a lonely individual, the socialization, the fellowship of church can be addictive because it is a surrogate for probably a lack of, real substantial relationships that you might be missing in your life. So church definitely can be an addictive thing, and we have to explore our motivations and our intentions, because we can have church because we are the church outside of a building. So if you feel the need to be in a particular spot all the time, then you need to re-examine that.
Okay, thank you very much. In fact, Tanisha, while I have you, I had a question for you earlier. So if disruption is a criterion for addiction, what do we call abusing substances or activities when the individual is a high-functioning individual? So this is for you because you were talking about high-functioning people and, disruption and stuff. So I don't know if you have something on this.
So not so much disruption, but the amount of time that you now spend on it. So the amount of time you now spend on seeking this thing and obtaining this thing and thinking about this thing. And you can try so very hard to keep a nice veneer the other times, but you're trying that much harder until eventually it will break down in some way, shape, or form in some area of your life. So you can be a functioning addict. So disruption is not solely. For me, it's more, for me and for the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual that we use to diagnose disorders. It's about how much time you're spending obtaining this thing, and does it take increasingly greater amounts of this thing to fulfill and to satiate you?
So I'm going to follow up with that. The term functional addict comes with some baggage with that. So somebody like Whitney Houston can be a functional addict because she has the money, right, not to break down her social constructs. So that's why you have a lot of superstars and high-level people that somebody like me and you will have to sell a car to keep our addiction up. Wherein people who has all the money in the world, they're able to be functional. Even some of us, I'm going to say this, like, people who can't get along without their coffee in the morning. There's people that have to have a certain breakfast. There's people that have a certain routine that is letting them gaining weight unconsciously, sedentary lifestyles, all of those things crossing over. But when it comes to the disruption is like 80 or 90% of what is happening. 20 to 15% is what they call functional. There's people who drives the trains. There's people who does everything every day, make $1 million deals. But because of, like Charlotte said, we live in a capitalistic society, it's okay. I can guarantee you there are people in the White House, there are people in government, and there are people in our very church. I give you two perfect examples, and I'm going to hurt some feelings now, and I'm going to keep it real. There are some musicians that are functional addicts, and that goes to church on Saturday and Sunday and get their high because of the attention they get. There are pastors who, when they preach on Saturday and Sunday mornings, are functional addicts because when they preach, they get a personal high. Now you have the worship leader who think they're better. Well, let me be careful, but are better now than the musicians, and they are better now than the pastor. And now they have their own silo where they get addiction. There's a term called addiction approval that they have to. So let me tell you what COVID has done. It has peeled back, hiding, going to church, going to the movies, watching sports, staying away from your family. And right now you have to look at yourself in the mirror and see who you are. So COVID, in a lot of ways, is a blessing. And so again, I believe moving forward, this forum is going to stay intact because two things has happened. Because if this day, May 23rd, without COVID, we would not be doing this. Let's call it. We will not be doing this. So this will move on. So God has a way. I think we talked about it earlier. A way that God has a way of shifting our minds. We were so caught up in church and volleyball games and Pathfinders and what have you. I probably wouldn't have seen Cecil, or I would have walked by Tanisha at camp meeting because I don't know her, or so these has brought it. Let me add one more thing, and I'm gonna do a little spanking here too. I am happy for COVID to give us the opportunities to see experts across the field. And this is not only in the Black Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I'm going to say it right, and this is in our people of color, and if you're not doctor or pastor, it seems that you're not an expert. And so when I see Tanisha and Shirla and other people talk about, because, you talk to a pastor about porn or whatever, it's sex addiction. There's people on your elder boards, and I said this before, and I'm going to bring it up again. There are men in the church that are training little girls to be their side piece. I'm just trying to let you know right now. Okay? So you could go to my brother right now is doing something with the Atlantic Union. My other brother is doing something. My best friend is doing something. My friend in Dr. Bird is doing something. Sabbath morning, you can pick and choose anybody you want. And over the first 5 weeks, after they ran out of their friends and experts, now the real experts like us are coming out to really talk about it. The church is here to change. So I'm just letting you know, I'm game. And you know what? I got to look at myself in the mirror. I'm just gonna keep it straight with you. Graham got to look at himself in the mirror because I had to step up my game. So after I cleaned the clutter, and Miss Graham had me do all of these things, and I got to watch the way I talk to people and respect people and what have you. I have my issues too. So I'm here in this forum to let you know, I'm not beating you. I'm telling you a little bit of myself, why I was going to church myself. And we all got to fix ourselves. So the first way to get away with addiction is look at yourself in the mirror and be like, oh snap. Yeah.
Who's that?
It is me.
I don't know how else to say this other than with God as my witness, OG, that was the most gentle spanking I've ever received. I mean, because I don't feel like I got spanked, you know what I'm saying? But I feel like you were speaking truth, you were really speaking facts there. And when you spoke about experts and how we have experts here and we have Black Seventh-day Adventist experts on this call, that's everything, and I don't think it should be overlooked whatsoever, which is why I wanted to talk about the high-functioning individuals, which is also not talked about often with everyone on the panel. So Shirla, because I'm moving from left to right on my screen, Shirla, would you like to touch on high-functioning individuals and addiction and just kind of what that looks like and just touch on this a little bit? It's okay to say no as well. Don't let me pressure you.
I'm here for this. No. The high functioning individual could be any one of us here on this video chat. We don't know what you do in your own time. We're not there 24 hours to see you. And we can have addictions that are not necessarily destructive to our social life and our functioning with people, but they're still disruptive. They're happening behind closed doors, or they're happening and they're not seen as addictive because they're accepted.
Right. Yes.
Dr. Valbrun, did you want to add on to this at all?
Now, that's literally, that last part was exactly what I wanted to say. It's acceptance. Like, for example, most people wouldn't say that they're addicted to their phone, but you take their phone away from them and they start itching. Okay. You hear that little ding, and guess what? You're classically conditioned Okay, and those are things that we don't associate, but guess what? Your mind does associate, right? And so what ends up happening is you have individuals who are going about their day doing things naturally and not fully understanding what they're doing, not even knowing. They're oblivious to what's actually happening to them. Like, for example, would we say that somebody who comes home at night, who has a glass of wine every single night with a meal, would they be considered an addict? Probably not. Okay, that's probably accepted in most cases, right? But then you do have the individual who, if they don't get their wine, okay, and they aren't able to unwind in a way that they are so used to doing, right? That could potentially cause a problem for them. And these are things that we have to consider. It's not just oh my gosh, I need to have this, I'm going crazy, right? It's not always just that. Sometimes it's subtle to the point where it's so normal, and you just think, oh, what's the problem with this? I just do this. It's like everybody else. Everybody else does this too.
Dr. Valvin, perfect. Okay, I thought I was going to cut you off, but I didn't.
No.
But that was perfect because you're leading in, and I think I know where you're going to go with this, but I think this question is good for you right now. What's wrong with trying vaping once? And the person said, I was told Juul is better than cigarettes. What is the problem with using it?
Okay. Wow. So here's the thing. I also have a public health background, and the area specific that I used to work under was the Tobacco Control Project, and also with childhood asthma. So yeah, let's just say like this: anything that's not natural, meaning anything that's not oxygen going into your lungs, okay, is bad for your lungs. There's no getting around it, okay? Even those, and the crazy thing is, there are people who use puffers, okay, who need it for their asthma, okay? But guess what? It still affects their lungs, all right? There's no getting away from that. The only thing that should be entering your lungs, okay, unless you absolutely positively need it, is oxygen, all right? Or so let's be clear on that. So now here's the thing. You take a puff of that one time. How do you know whether or not you're going to be addicted to that one thing? You don't know that. And so what ends up happening is nicotine is actually very addictive. All right. And now cigarettes, I know people say, oh, well, I don't smoke cigarettes, but I smoke, I do the vaping or whatever the case is. What ends up happening is you don't know what chemicals are actually in the vape itself. And therein lies a problem. That is actually a public health issue that we're dealing with right now, trying to help people understand that hookah and even vaping, those are things that can and has the potential to cause major morbidity in our populace.
I gotta agree with you, Doc. Vaping, for someone that follows me, that has been my public health cry over the last 9 months. And I think it's ironic that SARS-CoV has a lot to do with your respiratory building. My son first told me, he said, Daddy, nothing but oxygen belongs in your lungs, period, end of story. So the older I get, and you understand that, this is what our church don't teach. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to smack it down with this. Our church has two big problems, and I hate to always do this, but this is a problem. We do not look at the public health aspect of anything. We don't look at the mental health aspect of anything. And all of this is tied in to what Shirla said, to capitalism. Vaping exists for one reason, because public health beat the snot out of the tobacco industry when it came to this. That's all that is. So vaping was making its way through. And it's surprising to me the amount of our young people that are vaping, and we have not addressed it. And so I'm going to say this from a public health point of view. I'm putting my public health hat. If you see young people who are dying because of COVID is because their lungs were compromised prior to with vaping. Bottom line. So I guess we could write a paper on that and write an article on that, Leslie. but you know, that's the truth. Let me say this: a vaping company knew about that there was the tainted in the chain supply, and they fired their CEO. The only reason they fired the CEO is because the CEO, it was a big thing in September and October. And it was a big thing because Barron, the president's son, asked his mom about vaping. That's it. End of story. The vaping industry is supported by the tobacco industry. And it's like Big Graham and Little Graham. It's like Patrick and Paul is the tobacco industry, and they couldn't get none, and they put me out front there to preach. That's all about, because they need to still get their money. I say no more. And I'm sure my social workers and my counselors could back me up on that. Sorry.
No, you're fine. One thing I wanted to say in response to what you said, Dr. Valperin, was I had to Google it really fast. One pod of a joule is the equivalent of 20 cigarettes.
Right.
So when you're talking about not knowing if you're going to take just that one puff, there's also the fact that if you keep puffing, you can't even keep track of how many cigarettes you might be smoking in one sitting.
That's it. Can I add one last thing to this?
Of course.
Think about hookah. Okay, how long do you think you're smoking hookah for? Some people, they'll just be in the atmosphere for hours on end. All right. There's something called secondhand smoke that we're very familiar with. Yep. But how about third-hand smoke? Right. Third-hand smoke is something that is not very popular, but people kind of know about it. It's the stuff that stays on your clothes. Right. So that could constantly be going right back into your lungs. So do we really know how much time is spent breathing this stuff in? You're not really sure. And here's the other thing too. When you're actually the person directly smoking for hours on end, I mean, how many cigarettes or how much vaping or how much substance is actually in your lungs throughout that entire amount of time? You could have smoked maybe, I don't know, 30, 40, maybe 50, even 60 cigars and not even know it.
I'm not really sure. Sorry.
No, Shirley, go ahead.
I'm not really sure a lot about vaping. I know that the little I know about is it looks like a USB, and sometimes it could look like a pen, and people are like, is it something that's like refillable, or is it something you plug in? Like I don't know how it works. So can someone elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So look, if you go to views, Google Views, and look at the commercial, and it shows, and their title is called "The Perfect Puff is Here." It's a 30-second commercial, and if you could look it up and you could throw it up real quick, I'll look for it and I'll see if I can pull it up. It looks like a pen, and it's a device, and that device has wires inside of it to heat up oil. Yep. Right, or what they call the juice, and it makes what they call the perfect puff. When you blow out the smoke, it embellows everything. So they advertise it as less addictive than nicotine, but it's not only addictive, but the amount of poison. It's the same thing with drugs. If I want to stretch my marijuana, or I want to stretch my coke, I put it with rat poison, I put it with pee, I put it with doo-doo, I put it with mice innards to anything. There was a man that been smoking parsley for 8 years, and he wanted to sue his drug dealer because he didn't know he was smoking the right thing. So this is what the industry does to stretch their profits. Okay, so there's a whole program I could go on with electronic cigarettes and e-cigarettes. It's artificial. And I put this plug in, just like COVID, people who's recovered from COVID, just like 9/11, there's people that's still dying from 9/11, and there's people that you don't know what COVID's long-lasting effect. You don't know the long-lasting effects of e-cigarettes. So I just find it funny that you need a ventilator for SARS-CoV, just like you need a ventilator for kids who were dying for e-cigarettes. It's like trying to put air through a brick, that they said. So it's a lot of issues. And it just goes back to the health message, and I speak for myself. Your immunity goes up when you change the way you eat and the way you behave.
Yes.
Because COVID is all about your behavior. It's simple. Are you going to go next week when the president wants to open the church? Are we all going to Bridgeport Tabernacle next week? Graham ain't going. I know I'm not going, and I'm not singing. You're not going to see Graham till 2021. I'm going to let you know that right now. I got you. I'll return your tithe. I will speak for you or what have you. I'm good because, I'm a little, I don't want to put conspiracy theory. You don't see no governors getting sick. You don't see no mayors getting sick. And you don't see no presidents getting sick or vice presidents. So you do the math. Somebody knows how to get around this. All right.
Let me add a little bit to that. Not necessarily in terms of the COVID, but in terms of the behavior.
Right.
Mm. What happens is when you do something enough times, right, it becomes habit, right? But it's not just a habitual thing. It's something that your mind has now associated with that thing. So if you're constantly doing this, right? If you're constantly doing this thing, in order to break that addiction, you have to do something completely different.
Right.
And the issue with addiction is not so much your body saying, I'm craving this thing, because that goes away relatively short amount of time. Again, that 14 to 21 day window. What happens is the behavior can last years.
Yep.
And the behavior can lead you to go back to the addiction. I'm bypassing all of the neurochemical stuff because I don't want to bog the conversation down with that. But ultimately, that's what it boils down to. And the issue oftentimes is you start to miss the things that you used to do or the places that you used to go because, it was a behavioral thing rather than just an addictive thing.
People, places, things, just like Tanisha said, people, places, and things.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, panelists, for everything you've said thus far. Oh, sorry. Our last question, and it was definitely just answered in a few different ways, but our last question received was, the Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. So you don't really have to act out something if you're thinking about it, and especially if it's a constant thought. Wouldn't that be true too? So it was kind of a statement as much as it was a question, and I think if you could close us out on this question, Dr. Valbrun.
Sure. So here's the thing. Christ is worried about what goes on in your mind, not just what you do, right? Like, you don't see me out here killing people, okay? That's not my MO. That I'm not about that life. However, in my mind, right, I could be like, oh man, I would cut this person down, right? Or how about this? Even adultery for that matter, right? Or fornication, whatever. It first happens in the mind. You have to think it first before you actually do it, whether it's a reaction or not. And your character shines through. So what you feed your brain, okay, is ultimately going to come out. So trash in, trash out, good in, good out. Think about it like this. They say you are what you eat. And I was thinking about, I don't know why I was thinking about this earlier, but I was, and I'll try to keep this as short as I can. I had the opportunity to go to Ireland and they were talking about these cows, and they were talking about the milk and why it's so sweet because they eat the sweet grass. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. So then I said, well, what's the difference? I mean, it's just grass. They're like, well, the grass that they eat provides this type of milk, and you can only find it in this location because this grass is only found here. And I'm like, so in that moment, I realized, I'm like, okay, well, if I feed my mind a certain thing all the time, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'll act on it, but I may have a propensity to do that thing, right? There may be underlying things in my mind that may cause me to react a certain way. And so ultimately, we want to develop whole, healthy individuals, and we want our character to shine through, meaning you really want some good things to shine through.
Thank you. I mean, you couldn't have, I love what you said about the cows, because I went out to Ireland too. I didn't learn about the cows out there, but the air is just so fresh.
Oh my gosh, it is.
Oh my God, it's just, it's crazy. It's so different, you know, it's hard to really conceptualize. And I think tonight, what's so beautiful about this discussion is that at one point, as Mr. Gary Graham said, we couldn't conceptualize the world being like this. We couldn't conceptualize getting on Zoom, having a discussion like this. And in some of our churches, there might have been a time where we couldn't even imagine or conceive of having a discussion about many of the things that we talked about tonight. So I wanted to take a moment to thank all of our panelists. I mean, we have Tanisha. I almost said Tashila. I know it's Tashila, but sorry about that. You know, I don't want to mess up your name. But thank you, Tanisha, you know, independent clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience on this call. Thank you, Sherla, a therapist for at a nonprofit, an Oakwood alumni, master's degree from U of Albany. You know, we've got the brother, no doctor, you know, Dr. Leslie Valbrun, building that legacy every day and contributing a lot of great neurology tidbits for us tonight. So thank you. And I mean tidbits in a very respectful way. And lastly, Gary Graham, AKA OG. OG can stand for original Graham, or it can stand for original gangster. I don't know. He was talking about Brooklyn, and he sounds like he's made it high in the world, but he's still one with his roots, and I think that's very important. So thank you to all of our panelists.
Thank you, Joe.
Really
thank you. That's sweet of you.
Great experience for me, and I hope that our viewers at home have felt, you know, blessed by this experience as well. So if you could all bow your heads and close your eyes with me as we close out in prayer tonight. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to gather together, even though it had to be virtual. We appreciate tonight. We appreciate the discussion. We appreciate the sentiments, and we appreciate the questions. Please help those who are viewing tonight who sent questions or who thought of questions. Please help them to take something away tonight. Please help them to, if they have an addiction, to seek help, or to start at the first stage, which is prayer, and maybe even start at the second stage, or the possible second stage, which is opening up to a like-minded individual. Please help our families and our friends to stay safe during this COVID-19 pandemic. We do not want 2021 to be the first time that we see each other, and we definitely do not want this call tonight to be our last time seeing one another. Please make sure that everyone can log off safely. And I don't mean that in the same way as driving safely, but log off safely as in go somewhere where they're safe. And if someone does not have a place where they're safe, please help everyone to pray, to fast, and to reach out to one another, because right now is a time where we have to be a very strong, tight-knit community. Thank you, Lord, for everything. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.